In my coaching practice, I've been showing this artist how I make my glowing sunset oil paintings. But then I thought I can make a digital tutorial of this, demonstrate this technique in a way that you can use for sunrises, sunsets, anything with a glowing atmosphere. I see a lot of tutorials that start off with a gradient kind of like this, and then you paint in some silhouette, and there's no atmosphere, there's no glow. So that's what we're going to capture. And this will be catered to digital, but the general method should apply to just about any medium. I will be using this reference image, and I recommend you do the same to start so that you can properly extract the process into your original work. Now we're going to mentally simplify the painting into just two things, light and shadow. This cloud is in shadow and the sky is in the light. And our shadow will be a gradient. You can see another example of this in this silhouetted tree. And our sky will also be a gradient. And this is what a gradient looks like on our palette. This is the gradient for our shadow, and this is the gradient for our light. Now, why do we need all these colors? Well, if I took this yellow and tried to blend it right into even this kind of a red, we're just not going to get the richness that we see in here. So it's important that all of our colors are arcing in hue and saturation as they traverse into shadow. Now let's approximate a base light shade, which will be this for the sky, and this will be my base shadow shade. You can see that these two colors are basically in the middle of each of their value scales. Using the inking and syrup brush, and then I can paint in these bumpy shapes of clouds. Doesn't need to be perfect, and fill that in. I think I'll let this drop down just a tad. Thanks to digital painting, I can select this entire layer, create a new layer, and select one shade darker. Then I can change my brush to the painting round brush, and I'm going to start from the bottom with firm pressure so that this fills densely, and as I get closer to the sun I will start to release my pressure to create as smooth of a gradient as I can manage. You can see I'm also taking some liberties to put in some subtle modulations where I see opportunities, always starting from the bottom and working my way up. Once I'm happy with that, I can add a new layer and go down once again in value, pressing firmly at the bottom and then slowly releasing pressure as I get closer to the sun. Of course, I want to leave room for the shades I've already put down. I don't want to be too aggressive with this color, nor do I want this color to contaminate the original red that is up here, because this is more of a purple. It could mess with the orange a little bit. So I'm just slowly approaching these softer, more delicate areas, which I really want to be nice gradients, but have some interesting modulation. And if I feel like I'm going overboard, I can come back to this shade to help smoothen things out, being mindful that I have a brighter value on the other side that I could even bring up with this and push in this way. Subtlety is the key. I'm refusing to select colors inside of here. I'm only working from these three. I like to be as soft as I can at first. Can always sharpen things up later on. And I'm going to stop right here. I'm not going to go into this one just yet. I will return to my original shadow shade, select it, and invert it. So now the sky is selected, and I'll create a new layer just underneath it. And this was my original light shade. So I will add one darker shade, going with a larger brush now, and I will be pressing firmly in the areas where I really want this orange to be, and then I will start releasing pressure where I want there to be more of a gradient appearing. Trying to remind myself that I've got other colors coming, so it's okay to push in a little bit with this orange. Right now my gradient is centered around this, so I do want to shift that over. So I could either use the eraser tool with the round brush, or I could have just chosen the original yellow shade and painted it back in. It is important that my gradients are centered around the sun. This isn't finished until I'm satisfied. Once I am, I can add a new layer and go down one shade, following the exact same process. I'm not trying to push this orange on top of my yellow. That will maintain the greatest amount of saturation. I could even paint in some clouds if I wanted to, which might require a smaller size brush. And then I will repeat this process one last time with my final light shade. Push in on these corners. If I push this red into here, I'm going to get some nice drop off where this will have higher contrast and this won't take as much attention. So I am enjoying that. I think I'll push this in a little bit on that side. And I'm not afraid to grab other colors too, always being thoughtful about what color I'm using and where. So with a new layer selected, I will get this very bright yellow, and I'm going to focus more on my details. I use my firmest pressure for that, and then with more gentle pressure, I can push out from that sun to create a bit of a glow. I can even check the size of my brush and push my edges out for kind of a fun sun flare. Once I'm satisfied with that, I can just go up in value. Then I can place my sun, leaving just a little bit of room for the bright yellow around its edges. And then with a smaller size brush and with gentle pressure, I can push out with the white just a little bit more. I could return to my yellow and maybe push a little bit more out from my edges before returning to my white with gentler pressure. Something like that, but you can see how I really can just play around with some of the details at this stage, thinking about the direction that the light would be coming from. And then we can return to our shadow, which again, this is still this color. So we've got 2 more to go. So I can return to my shadow shape, select that, add a new layer just above my darker shades. And I'm going to keep this orange color really just inside here. Can press pretty firmly at the very beginning, and then I'm quickly releasing my pressure. I just want to give the slightest glow to the tips of these clouds. And I'm thinking that I'll actually return to my shadow shape, which will be with this shade, and I just want to unselect my select tool so I can push in and redefine whatever silhouette that I want to have. So I can select this again, return to my final colors, punch that in. I want to be very subtle with this. I do still want to have that silhouette there, and I might even just add the smallest amount right along these edges here, just to soften it just a small amount. Now that I'm satisfied with my glow, I'm ready for my final darkest shade. Once again, with this selected, using a larger brush, this is where I see it the most dark. And I'm going to be pretty gentle with this one because this value is quite dark. Wherever I don't put this, the colors are going to really pop out a lot more. If I feel like I'm getting out of hand, I can go back to soften some of this down. And finally, I can work on the edge of these clouds to capture the light. And I feel like they are a value somewhere in between these 3. So I'll take this and I can add a little bit of that yellow into it, maybe even a little bit of this as well, just a little toned down. Then I can select my shadow layer, make sure I'm painting in a new layer, and paint right along the edges of these clouds, letting there be a little bit of a modulation in them as well. Doesn't have to be much, can just be a little bit. Couldn't help myself and just worked on this just a little bit more, added some of this yellow right into here, and that just gives it a very luminous effect. And for some final touches, I'm going to add a new layer, change my brush to something a little more fun like this jagged one, and I will more selectively choose a color, and I think I'll use a pretty large size, and kind of just let some fun brush strokes come in. Something like this, trying to see it from a distance. Once again, digital just gives you some opportunities to really play, experiment until you get something that you're happy with. Just gives a lot more character. In here I could create some more depth perhaps. Trying to pick some rich colors. But that kind of just softens out this edge in here, which puts more attention onto that edge, just to give you an idea. And we can call that done. So whatever order you do it, the main idea is that you have one overall gradient for your lights and one overall gradient for your shadows. I find it's easier to get the gradient of the shadows first and then build up the lights on top. Now there's obviously a lot more that goes into this in traditional painting, especially with how you go about making your gradients, how you manage colors that have different levels of paint density to them, but hopefully this gives you an overview of the general method. In the description I have a Procreate file that you can use. It gives you this gradient with this reference image so that you can play around yourself. There's also a link to submit your art for a free critique if you're interested in coaching. Otherwise, have a beautiful day.